In a small, sun-drenched village in Malawi, a young boy named William Kamkwamba possessed an intellect that burned with uncommon intensity. He gathered his family one afternoon to witness a small but profound miracle. With focused excitement, he displayed a simple contraption, then dramatically removed the battery from a nearby radio. After a moment of silence, the radio impossibly crackled back to life. The demonstration etched a look of pure astonishment onto his father's kind, weathered face. William eagerly explained his invention, a miniature, wind-powered fan generating electricity. This, however, was merely a prototype. His true vision was far more ambitious. He proposed that with a much larger fan, a proper windmill, they could power a water pump to draw water from deep within the earth. This would irrigate their parched fields, finally breaking the generational curse of drought. The idea was a seed of hope, but its germination required a shocking sacrifice: the metal frame and components of his father's most cherished possession, his bicycle. The suggestion instantly extinguished the warmth in his father's eyes, replacing it with a storm of indignation. For a man in his village, a bicycle was far more than transportation. It was a symbol of status, a partner in the daily struggle for survival, and a vessel of his dignity. The idea of dismantling it for a boy's whimsical project was not just impractical, it was an insult. His father's frustration boiled over, dismissing the idea as pure fantasy. How could a young boy presume to solve a problem that had defeated generations of experienced farmers? Stung by the rebuke, William retorted with youthful pride, suggesting his formal education gave him knowledge his unschooled father lacked. The words, spoken in the heat of defiance, struck a deep nerve, and his father's simmering anger erupted. The consequences were swift and absolute. William's academic pursuits were declared finished. He was to rise at dawn and learn the hard truths of the land, his new classroom, the unforgiving fields, and his textbook, a heavy hoe. The library, his sanctuary, was now forbidden, and his stupid thing, the small windmill, was to be abandoned. He would become a farmer. Tears welled in William's eyes as the weight of this sentence settled upon him. A future of possibility had shrunk to a lifetime of hopeless labor. Though his spirit rebelled, he was powerless to resist his father's command. He began his days before dawn, wielding a hoe in the tired soil. Yet, even as his body toiled, his mind remained a restless fire. He secretly continued his studies, picking apart the old radio to understand its electronic heart. One night, a burst of static woke his sleeping father. This time, there was no shouting, only a quiet, heavy resignation as his father confiscated the radio, walking out into the dark fields alone, hoping to catch a weather forecast that promised rain. The weather itself had become a cruel and erratic tyrant. Torrential downpours would turn the fields to mud, only to be followed by a merciless, scorching heat that baked the earth. The family's meager savings dwindled as the harvest failed. Yet, even in these dire straits, his father scraped together the money for William's first term of school fees, holding on to the belief that knowledge could offer his son a different future. Filled with this hope, William, in his new school uniform, walked with friends to the town's only school, yearning to immerse himself in learning. The joy was fleeting. Barely halfway through the term, he was reminded that the remaining fees were due, or he would be expelled. William promised the money would come, knowing the family's situation made it an empty promise. This reality sharpened his focus. Every minute in the classroom was precious. At home, his studies were hampered by the growing darkness. The family could no longer afford kerosene for their lamp. Undeterred, William led a friend to the village garbage dump, hoping to salvage parts to build his own source of light. They found nothing. On their way back, they overheard a heated village meeting. A tobacco company was offering a pittance to buy the local trees for fuel. The village chief warned that this deforestation would leave them vulnerable to floods, but for many hungry families, the lure of immediate cash was too strong. Ignoring the desperate protests of William's father, a majority signed the contracts, unwittingly accelerating their own community's demise. William watched as the trees fell, a sense of dread growing within him. His ingenuity found another outlet when the radio battery died during a community soccer game. Sprinting home, he returned with a handful of spent batteries. He explained that by connecting them in series, he could pool their residual power. To the amazement of his friends, the radio crackled back to life. Later that night, walking home in the rain, William discovered his sister Annie secretly meeting his science teacher. Fearing a scandal, His first instinct was to disable the teacher's bicycle. As he examined it, he made a pivotal discovery. The bicycle's lamp was not powered by a battery, but by a small device on the wheel of dynamo. When the wheel spun, the dynamo generated electricity and the lamp lit up. This faint glow illuminated more than the dark path. It illuminated William's future. He returned home to the crushing news that his education had to be sacrificed for food. The next day, the principal officially expelled him. The cruel finality of this act coincided with the consequences of the deforestation. Heavy rains, no longer held back by the trees, turned into raging floods, sweeping away what was left of their crops. His father fought the deluge, a lone figure in a futile battle against nature's fury. The floods were followed by a relentless drought. What little had survived was now baked to dust under the sun. Realizing they faced starvation, his father took William on a long journey by bicycle to seek help from a government official. The response was a death blow. Corrupt officials had sold the country's grain reserves. A catastrophic famine was imminent, and they were on their own. His father's last hope was a direct appeal to the president, who was scheduled to visit on a campaign tour. Meanwhile, William refused to be idle. He returned to the junkyard, believing he could forge his own salvation. His persistence was rewarded when he found a car battery and a water pump. He now had most of the components, but still needed a way to charge the battery. He snuck back into the school to ask his science teacher about the dynamo. His expulsion had revoked his library privileges, so in a moment of desperation, he subtly blackmailed the teacher with his knowledge of his relationship with Annie. The teacher relented, persuading the librarian to allow William access. The kind woman not only agreed but handed him a book called Using Energy, which contained the blueprints for a DC generator. A month later, the president arrived. The village chief, tasked with giving a speech of welcome, instead delivered a brave and honest plea for aid, speaking of the impending famine and the government's responsibility. The president, angered by the defiance, had his bodyguards brutally beat the elderly chief. In the ensuing chaos, the president fled, and any hope of government help vanished. William's father now understood. They could only rely on themselves, but their meager food stores were barely enough to last 2 months. In a desperate move, he stripped the metal roofing from their house to sell for cash. On his way to market, he heard the president on the radio denying the famine, a lie to protect his re-election. Enraged, he joined a protest march, leaving his family unprotected. While he was gone, their home was robbed, their last remaining grain stolen. In minutes, they were left with nothing. William returned from town with a 30-pound bag of grain he'd managed to secure during a chaotic and violent distribution, but it was a temporary reprieve. The sister, Annie, overwhelmed by the fear and hardship, fled the house after a tearful confrontation with her mother. The next morning, she was gone, leaving behind a note explaining her departure would mean one less mouth to feed. Her heartbreaking sacrifice left one other thing. On her bed lay the bicycle dynamo from the science teacher's bike. She had eloped, but had left William the final piece of his puzzle. Galvanized by his sister's act, William and his parents confronted the school principal about the teacher who had run away with their daughter. The shamed principal allowed William back into the library, where he found the kind librarian had also left, but not before fully charging the car battery he had found. With the dynamo, the battery, and the knowledge from his book, William rallied his friends. He laid out his grand plan to build a full-size windmill. Though some were skeptical, his conviction and their shared desperation inspired them to help. They assembled a massive machine from scrap. Water pipes became blades, tangled wires were rewound, and junk was transformed into a machine of hope. Only one component was missing: the bicycle. William hopefully presented his working prototype to his father, but was met with furious refusal. When his friends tried to help persuade him, his father, paranoid and broken, threatened them with a hoe, seeing them as thieves. Defeated, the friends departed, leaving William utterly alone. That night, his mother confronted her husband, her voice strained with a lifetime of loss. "When will we stop losing?" she asked, her words piercing the core of his father's pride. As a man who had failed to provide for his family, he was broken. In this moment of utter despair, he made one last gamble. He chose to trust his son. He gave William the bicycle. This act of faith ignited the community. Villagers emerged to help, and together they erected a tall tower. William scaled the structure and mounted the windmill. He connected the circuits, checked the connections, and released the blades to the wind. They began to turn, slowly at first, then faster, spinning the bicycle wheel and driving the dynamo. A current of electricity, of life, flowed down to the battery. While it charged, the villagers dug irrigation ditches, carving paths of hope into the dry earth. Then came the sound, the whir of the water pump. A single drop of water emerged from the pipe, then a trickle, then a gushing, life-giving stream. A cheer rose from the village. William's father, tears of pride streaming down his face, embraced his son. His boy was not a dreamer, he was a creator. William's story spread like wildfire. His achievement earned him a scholarship to a top secondary school, which led him to Dartmouth College in the United States, and a degree in environmental science. He returned to Malawi, no longer an unknown boy, but a man equipped with knowledge to continue lifting his community. This is a true story of how knowledge, ingenuity, and unyielding perseverance can triumph over dire circumstances. William's journey proves that destiny is not preordained. It is forged through struggle and will. In the face of overwhelming despair, a young boy with a powerful idea refused to surrender. He looked at the wind, not as an adversary, but as an ally. And with it, he brought water, life, and hope back to his people.